instant silence. Going.
What I'm hearing from the table is there's never been a time where the need to actually, I have a conversation agent to seller to say, this is what you need to do, this is the value of your property, this is the strategy you should play. And we all know that agents generally don't like to have those difficult conversations. So again, assuming that agents are going to be listening, watching this conversation, what advice would you give, Matt, to agents on that tough conversation in 2018?
Yeah, listen, I think a number of people have mentioned that in the past 5 years it's been a pretty good market, and you could be an agent and you could get an auctioneer in and the auctioneer do their job and get the property sold. We always have in our business, we have a pre-campaign meeting, a midway meeting and a pre-auction meeting. And sometimes that midway meeting I've witnessed it has been a bit fluffy.
Yeah.
And it's sort of hugging the vendor and perhaps second vendoring at times, where it should be an opportunity to be able to be prepared firstly by the agent. The agent needs to be prepared and have had the conversations with the buyers. And someone mentioned that earlier, that they're not having conversations with buyers. Buyers sit there and say, I'm not interested in that property. So they don't go to the next question and say, okay, but if you were, where do you see value? You've been in the marketplace for 6 months now, so I can give some feedback to my owners. Well, you're saying 8 to 880, I see it at 780, okay, or 850, or whatever it may be. And they should be giving that feedback in their written reports to their vendors to be letting them know they've withdrawn, but this is where they saw value at your property. So then when you do have that meeting, you can sit down and give them that feedback of what buyers are saying price-wise, but also, and I'm sure everyone in the room has witnessed it, where an agent would have no idea where the reserve price is going to sit until the pre-auction meeting. And that is just 20 minutes before those meetings where they say, we'll give it to you tomorrow. No, you won't. I'm the auctioneer. I won't be conducting the auction if I don't have a reserve here at the pre-auction meeting. The agenda was sent to you and it was very clearly stated, this is what we need tonight. So they need to be having that discussion midway and saying, if the auction, Steve, was tomorrow, where would your reserve be sitting based on the feedback we've given you? But they've got to have had that feedback to be able to give them an answer.
Why do you think there's a lack of, and you use the word, James, accountability to have that tough conversation? I mean, the industry seems to have a lot of that going on.
I think the process and the education process has to start from the minute you sign the property up, and it's a process. If you walk into your vendor 2 weeks into the campaign and start trying to tell them their house is worth 15% less than what they thought it was worth 3 weeks before, and you expect to get a good reaction, right? Well, then you're not a real estate agent. It's very easy to get the message across in the right way, but you have to do it over a consistent time frame from the minute you start the campaign. And that means sitting down and talking to them. That means providing emails every day. That's an email every morning at 5:30, a quick email telling them what's going to happen today, what's happened in the last 24 hours, because the one thing vendors want is communication. And quite often a vendor will feel really good after you've had a hard conversation with them, because they actually feel they know what's going on.
Yeah.
As a vendor, there's nothing worse than going to bed at night not knowing what is happening. And agents think they're doing the right thing by not having honest conversations with them because they're protecting them, but actually in the long run, they're doing them a lot more harm and they're not helping them. Because the worst, and I'll finish with this, the worst thing you can have happen at the end of a campaign is go into an auction room and have no bid. That is the worst thing that can happen, right? Or have no offers, because at the end of the day, the vendor's going to turn around and say, I haven't even had an offer. You know?
I support that completely. That that's the one thing I've started to see with a few of the really good quality agents is that touch point, like you talked about in the morning. Hey, this is what we're going to do today. Check-in point at the end of the day. This is what's unfolded, and it's daily. So it's 2 touch points. It's almost becoming now this social media outlet. Hey, Mr. Vendor, this has just hit the market. Hey, this just sold overnight. Just wanted to keep you up to date. Hey, we've got 3 new properties that came on overnight on realestate.com. Pod. So that communication, but the consistency of it day and night, like that's important. And again, you're representing someone's biggest asset. I think, the quality of the information that we send through has to be real. I'm not against feedback, but I think sometimes agents just have to be a little bit careful of, is this person going to buy this house? And do we actually, how important or how relevant is the information if they think it's worth 800, but they're never going to buy the house or they're not going to buy it for it?
You have to have a relationship with that buyer to begin with. You can't just have the first person you've met for the first time and get their feedback. You've got to say, this person's looked at X, Y, Z with us, and this is the feedback they've given on yours.
Put context, and which is perfect. Yeah, it puts context behind the behaviour of the buyer in support of the feedback, because that gives you the strength. Is to buy this, they're not going to buy the property, but they think it's worth 800. Well, that does not help me with my biggest asset.
2 weeks ago, our number one agent, Ray White, Gavin Rubenstein, put up 8 properties in one night, and he sold all of them. It was no fluke. He sold all those properties. It was hard work, right, from the minute he signed every property, and it was hard work to the end. But he had buyers on every property. He had the vendors at the right level, and every vendor, bar none, was happy, delighted with the outcome. And it was all and it was all through the process.
And obviously, we talked about negative equity. They must be the toughest conversations.
Well, it's almost the first question that I ask. Like literally, my first question that I ask from people that ring up and say, can you give me a ballpark figure of what the property's worth? Pretty soon after that, I'm asking them what their payout figure is. I'm not sure. It's like, well, you probably want to find out real quick. I mean, it's kind of like I almost feel like a car dealer, because that's typically what you get asked when you walk into a car dealership, right? Yeah. But I've had to cut deals with people where we've actually had a side agreement saying, well, we might be able to scrape enough money to pay the bank out, but we're going to have to take a personal loan after we settle the deal. So the bank needs to release the title, settle the property, and we get a personal loan to pay your fee, because normally we take our fee out of the commission. So, they've got to refinance and take equity out of another property to pay the shortfall. So we're having some, like those, as Tom Pennell says, those crucial conversations up front. It's like, well, we're 60 grand short on this one, we've got to take 60 grand of equity out of that, tip it into this so we can maybe get out of it. So, it's tough love, straight up. And my glass is always half full, but I sound like it's sort of half empty on that phone call. It's like, I don't make money telling you not to sell your property, but if you're going to sell, you're going to have to grab the bull by the horns, rip the band-aid off quick, because there's no point fluffing around.
But that's the reality of the market there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in some places in Queensland as well.
Yeah, certainly very similar. That Gladstone high area where rents went through the roof, dropped back down.
Perth,
very similar.
What about the ACT?
Oh, look, we're still quite positive, but I think the important thing is, the hardest part about selling a home is accepting the offer.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad, it's giving that offer context. So I think one of the shortcomings that I sometimes see is the agent not priming the sellers for what's actually going to unfold during the auction, predicting it in advance. Okay, this is how many registered bidders we're expecting to have. You can't, with a crystal ball, identify exactly how many, but if you say, oh look, we're likely to have 6 registered bidders, and then on Saturday only 1 turns up, your credibility as an agent, and then to give them the advice to accept an offer, really does diminish. So I think just being upfront with your communication and having those tough conversations. Well, look, Saturday's not looking as positive as we would have thought 2 weeks ago. We're predicting these 2 bidders are going to be participating, but at this stage they're only talking X, which is still a little bit short on what you want. And just, I guess, so when it does happen, look, this is exactly what we talked about at the vendor meeting. We have fallen that little bit short. What do you want to do now? They're, I guess, in a better space to make those big decisions, because 2 minutes in the home mid-auction feels like 2 seconds for them. If they're not going into that prepared for every single event, outcome, you can't expect a seller to make a rational decision.
And a good agent should know. I'm sure Gavin went into that night knowing at a high percentage that 8 from 8 were going, because he does the background work. His owners are where they need to be, his buyers are where they need to be.
I think what's really important pre-auction is you sit down with your vendors and you role play the 3 different scenarios that can play out. So they have an understanding of what's going to happen tomorrow. Because when you're under pressure, it's a whole different story to being having a casual conversation. So you say, well, this is the best outcome. This is easy. If this transpires, happy days. This could happen, and then worst case scenario, this could happen. So at least your vendors are prepped for what's going to happen tomorrow, and you've role play all the situations.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
To your point, that's a really important one, I reckon, because that pre-meeting, if you're speaking about, let's say you talk about you've got 3 bidders, you're expecting it, and you get one, you're in big trouble, because they're on a roller coaster, just sitting there, their brains just fried with what's going to happen, and if you tell them 3 and 1 turns up, think about how they feel.
Correct.
And you just put yourself on the back foot. And you talk about, I think you're talking about then, James, is going through, well, here's what can happen. So we're going to have a couple of different scenarios tomorrow, because you can never guarantee it. I remember once I was going to bid at an auction, and my daughter got sick, and I wanted to go and buy the property, but my daughter was sick and we didn't go to the auction. So for all intents and purposes, I was a bidder, I was a buyer, but there's some things that are out of your control. And I think it's important that they understand that, whilst here's what we understand and this is what the landscape looks like, I don't have full control. I can't drive them to the auction, but here's what we know. Here's what we know, and this is what we don't know. And they've just got to be really comfortable around that, because there is some unknown with it sometimes. You generally feel that this is what's going to unfold and this is what's going to happen, but it doesn't always work out that way,
and that's
which
the
is
other thing.
some of the allure of the auction.
You can't control the market. The agents can't control the market. The auctioneers can't control the market, but you can control your activities. And that vendor management, as Carl touched on and James spoke about, that upping the vendor management and having the conversations and building trust with your vendors so that they head into that auction and or through the process that they're able to meet the market and they're able to make a clear decision. Particularly, like we sell a lot for a lot of prestige clients that are selling $3-4 million properties. The vendor management's got to be critical, because they're making a decision that could be $200,000-300,000 in the difference between the next move. And so for most of those sellers and for those clients that Gavin would have had selling 8 properties of prestige Eastern Suburbs properties, he's got to build implicit trust with those vendors to make a decision when you're selling a multi-million-dollar property, so that they make a decision on the day and they know that it's the best decision.
Well, can I just say there though that prestige high-end client, that $300,000 is no different to a $30,000 difference for 20. So what I was going to say, just adding on to what Gavin was saying a minute ago, is I think the agents are very eager to talk up a story to a vendor, and I think if you can kind of under-promise and over-deliver, and if you think you're going to get 3 bidders, if you think you're going to get 4 bidders, you might be talking about 3 with the possibility of a 4th, and then if you deliver 4, then you kind of look solid on the day, as opposed to talking up 4 and ends up being 2 or 3. And then you kind of, deflating expectations. It's all about managing those expectations. Yeah. So keep a little bit of an ace up your sleeve.
Yeah, I agree.
Deliver more on the day, and then, just enhance that trust level.
I think too, for agents, don't, what I've seen is don't let the reaction of your owner to the feedback dictate how you then become with them. Stick to your process, stick to the way you're going to deliver that information, because the owner's going to be emotional throughout the whole process. But if you stick to it, I think the result at the end of the day is a lot more consistent than an owner saying, oh, well, I'm disappointed with 3 groups through, and then you try and cuddle them for a week.
Yeah.
And then you're creating the up and down relationship rather than allowing them to come to the realisation.
With a degree of empathy though, I think, if you do have that disappointment, you've got to show a degree of empathy by saying, look, I understand that that's slightly disappointing. Don't get me wrong, I'm disappointed as well. But we're not in the problem bit, we're in the solution business. So agree and empathise that it is slightly frustrating. However, that's why we need to do X, Y, and Z in order to change our approach. Talking about the process and things, we've got to make sure we're all dynamic within that process as well and can adjust to different outcomes, because as good as we all like to think we are, at the end of the day, like we've all agreed, well, you're welcome, mate. As we've all agreed, none of us know what's going to happen. So we've got to make sure that the vendors are aware that there might be an adjustment in strategy. But I think giving them the full anatomy of the skeleton of the process at the start, I think is super important, so that if you do have to have a crucial conversation, framework's already there. And the process and the feedback's just putting the meat on the bones, so to speak, and they understand how it's going to taste if it gets to a certain point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
To that as well, for me, there's one word right throughout an auction campaign that just rings true with buyer and seller for an agent, and it's the word responsibility, and it's allocating it. So again, Mr. Sully, you've had 3 buyers through, but you can change that, but that's up to you. So decisions there. We're pushing responsibility back to a buyer to perform auction day, and they need to understand their role and responsibility, same as a vendor. So again, we have only had 3 groups through. Your decision now if you'd like to change it, whether that's attached to the price guide or attached to marketing, but now we can address this and we can change it, but this is your decision, how we address it. And it's just pushing back and making sure that we're heading towards the day that they're accepting their role and their responsibility to get buyers there as much as what you are.
Really good estate agents have probably in this market had a face-to-face conversation with the buyer on the Friday, and they've actually begun the education process on buyers where it's been too much predisposed on vendors. Like everyone's been told, vendor meeting, vendor education, but I think in this market, buyer meeting, buyer education, buyer phone call at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning, not at 2 o'clock when the auction's at 2 o'clock. Other things I would say, Steve, that I see the really good agents doing is they've got this ability to read the play without having commission breath, asking the right questions and sort of having a rough idea at the status of where the buyers are. I think good agents now ask buyers 2 or 3 days before they set the reserve. They'll ask the buyer, I'm going to see my vendor. I want to tell them what you think the reserve price should be. And I think that they're doing it. I think they're having those conversations and they're going in and they're sitting in front of the vendor and they said such and such, such and such, such and such said they'll be at the auction. They believe that this is what the reserve price should be. And the reserve price doesn't really matter that much because as we know is that reserve is changing even during the auction. The ones that I actually get turned off are the ones that when the auction's at 2 o'clock and they say to me, Tom, hang tight. I've definitely got 2 or 3 people. They're probably just running late, and then they're getting on the phone, and they're ringing people at 2:04, and the people aren't answering the phone, and then I have to actually hit them with the realization they're not coming. Right? They're not coming. So I would say that what they do poorly is have crucial conversations.